All right, so I am remote today. I want to thank my team. They've really been stepping up and helping me out. Just this week we had to put my mother-in-law into an assisted living facility. It's beautiful. It's the right move, but as I've been telling everybody, raising parents is hard. So I'm actually here at home today. Thank you for joining us tonight. I want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. It's coming up here next week. I feel very lucky to be a diver. I am headed to the Boston Sea Rovers show. I'm leaving tomorrow for the weekend. It's known for its film festival, and I'm looking forward to seeing old friends and hopefully bringing more top-notch speakers to our speaker series. So a couple of things I wanted to highlight that is coming up, upcoming events at Y-kiki Divers. March 21st, we have another opportunity to shake out your dive gear. We're coming up on our local dive season where Mermet. It'll be at the end of April. That is when we're starting to go back to Mermet Springs. So we invite you to join us at Principia School Pool. You do need to register for us, and you can shake out your gear in the pool and make sure you're race ready, as my dad would say. March 21st is also a WOW weekend, a We Own Winter weekend at Mermet Springs. We'll also be doing some dry suit diving. We've got our contest in full bloom. That's where we're trying to encourage everybody to come out and join us over the winter months. Visibility has been very good, although with this rain, that doesn't help us. And Nick Atherton and Julia Atherton have been our hosts, so I want to thank both of them for all their efforts and being good hosts for our We Own Winter events. Our next speaker for April is Dr. Fork Tillmans with Divers Alert Network. And she is going to be talking about dive into hydration, the science behind keeping quenched. So, of all of the problems that I've had on dive trips with divers, almost always it's around being dehydrated. So, this will be a very interesting perspective. Please join me in listening to Dr. Tillmans explain hydration. April 25th, mark your calendars. We're going to go and we're going to have a poker run and fun dives at Mermet Springs. So that's one of the ways we're going to launch our open water dive weekend at Mermet is playing poker. You can't go wrong with that. So there's zero skill involved. You swim around to different attractions. You collect cards, it might be a little clip, and then you trade it in for cards, and then whoever has the best poker hand wins some prizes. So Marco Mariscal from our team will be spearheading our poker run. For travel, I want to make mention, I haven't had any takers so far, but I do have one more mail share left on our Banda Sea trip aboard the beautiful, the stunning Dewi Nusantara. It's in Indonesia. It'll be April 9th through the 23rd, so about a month away. So if you have a last minute opportunity and you want to join us, I have space for you. You will not be disappointed. 5-star all the way, 5-star diving, 5-star food. They give you back massages when you come out of the water with hot towels. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely stunning. So if you're available, give me a call. I still have space on my girls trip, which is June 6th through the 13th. All I have to do is check on current airfare prices. So give me a call if you want to jump in on that. It seems like it's a few months away. Well, it seemed like it was further away, but now it's only a few months away. So get that on the calendar. And then finally, just this week, we had an opening on our Guanaja trip to Villa on Dunbar Rock. So Jeff and Stacy Mormel are my leaders of the Guanaja trip, and it's been sold out for the longest time, but they had a medical situation come up and they had to bow out. So I have a cabin, a room available. So July 25th through August 1st. So give us a call there. And last but not least, I think what I wanted to do was just share Shark Skin is they've made a shoe and it's called an everywhere shoe. And Paul, I don't know if you have a sample you can highlight.
Shoes.
I gotta switch back so I can see you. Ooh, oh.
Show the bottom.
This one is in pink.
Look at the foot pad. Ooh.
But great boat shoe.
Excellent.
Wouldn't you say?
Yes, very grippy.
Yeah, excellent. So those are available at Y-kiki Divers. Stop in and kind of check them out. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce tonight's guest speaker. So I met Maureen Langevin on our Little Cayman trip, but it was only after hearing about her from our mutual friend, Sally Warman. And so we got to dive with her, with Mo, as she's called Mo. We got to dive with her at Little Cayman and just had the very best time. And she highlighted one of her films at Little Cayman. So I invited her to join us tonight to highlight a couple of other videos. She's the co-founder, along with her husband, of Dive Voyage Expeditions. And they've made a couple of award-winning documentaries. And I would just like you to join me in welcoming Maureen and her husband, Steve, to our meeting tonight. Thank you.
Yay. Hey, thanks for having us, Valerie. I dragged my husband along. Thanks for introducing us. But I know we have two videos that we're going to show. It's about Northeast wreck diving, and it's about, the early divers that got everything started in the Northeast. And I just wanted to say a couple things because, my husband and I, we're a team. We started Dive Voyager Expeditions back in, I believe it was 2009. And the reason, what got us started, the inspiration was we became instructors, and Patty told us to bring our divers diving, so we started doing videos. And the two things that divers always asked us about right off the bat, new divers, was number one, what about sharks? And number two, what do you see off in New Jersey? So, we know that there's at least 7,000 documented shipwrecks off in New Jersey. Well, I should say in the Northeast. It's New Jersey, Long Island, New York area, right? And that's just the documented ones. Let me see. And, with these shipwrecks, we became interested in the history of the shipwrecks, right? And then, who were the first ones to dive on the shipwrecks and got all these artifacts, right? So I'm going to turn it over to my husband, because he's going to talk about the pioneers of Northeast wreck diving, and that was the men, and then the women of Northeast wreck diving is about the women. Right.
So our first video was discovering New Jersey's artificial reefs, and we showed it at the dive shop. And Joe Skimmons comes up, the owner of the dive shop, and says, "Hey, Steve, you got to get all these old guys that were there in the 60s, 70s, and 80s before, the stories are gone forever. And a lot of them have now since passed away. So we still have these videos. We got to interview two of my heroes. One of them is gone, and the other three are still alive. So the hero to me was Steve Belinda and Mike DeCamp. So what it was with these guys, they're the ones, when you get a book, you couldn't look on the internet in the 80s when I started diving to say, hey, we're going to the Stolt on Saturday, let's read about the Stolt. You had to go to a book. You couldn't go to the internet and find all this information. And when you went through these books, every picture, courtesy of Steve Belinda, courtesy of Mike DeCamp, courtesy of Steve Belinda, courtesy of Evelyn Dudas, it was all these people. So we got to meet our heroes.
So we did the pioneers. That was first. And then we decided that I was like, well, we got to do women of Northeast wreck diving. You can't just do the men, and then that's how I met Sally. I mean, and Sally and I are good friends, and I don't know what else to say about that. So let's just roll it.
They're sisters from another mother.
They really are, aren't they?
Cheers.
All right, you want to roll it?
I think we're
Right.
gonna roll the Pioneers one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Ah, here we go.
Maybe.
You got it.
Here in the Northeast, thousands of shipwrecks lie just offshore, accessible to divers who love exploring their history and the challenge of technical diving. But who were the first divers to descend upon these wrecks? The explorers who risked everything in search of adventure and sunken treasure. Come join us as we dive into the past to discover the legends and relive the stories from the pioneers of Northeast wreck diving. The Dive Voyager team sought out to find the first to dare the wrecks of the Northeast. Legends like Mike DeCamp, recognized as the father of Northeast wreck diving. He was the first to organize dive trips out of Point Pleasant. Mike pioneered dive gear such as the Pony Bottle and the Jersey Upline. Captain Paul Hepler, one of the early dive boat captains. He discovered many shipwrecks and has the most extensive list in his log. Captain Paul found the famous pair of locomotives off Long Branch. Gene Gear, scuba instructor and environmentalist. Gene's underwater research helped NOAA stop ocean dumping. His research contributed to improved water quality and coastal marine life. Captain Steve Belinda of the well-known research vessel Wahoo. He's a legend, inspiration, and leader as a captain and diver. Captain Steve made the Andrea Doria, the Mount Everest of wreck diving, a household name. These guys were the first, driven by the thrill of diving the wrecks of the Northeast. Today we go to our local dive shop to get certified, purchase equipment, fill tanks, and book charters. Specialized computers monitor dive profiles, dry suits keep us warm, and high-performance regulators allow us easy breathing regardless of depth. But what was it like 50 years ago when the first divers ventured into the mysterious waters of the Northeast? Where'd they get gear, and what equipment did they use?
At that time, there were no pressure gauges.
You switched over to another tanker and you came up or whatever it was when it got a little hard to breathe. The tanks had that valve on the back which you could pull down and you get a little extra air.
It's supposed to give you 300 pounds of air at the end of the dive when you pull the valve. If you had remembered to set the valve, and if you hadn't accidentally banged it on something during the dive.
They were a disaster because being in a wreck, it always got knocked down somewhere during the dive, and so you didn't have your reserve.
So it was kind of touch and go. You didn't really know how much air you had.
The depth was determined by the boat, the sathometer, and you were always working on the bottom or pretty close to the bottom. And you had a watch screwed into a metal aluminum case, and you could look at the watch. It wasn't a stopwatch, you had to remember what time you started.
We didn't use BCs, per se. They were just coming into favor then.
I remember putting on the first unisuit, an orange-colored sort of thing made out of foam neoprene. Well, it's like a regular dry suit, except it's made out of wetsuit material.
My first wetsuit was, I think, $30. Had zippers in it. Had zippers in the ankles, a zipper, and a zipper. And they were aluminum zippers, and I think it was only like a month and a half the zippers had rotted out.
Later on in the 70s, then they began to use BCs, horse collars.
What you might call, invented the pony bottle and put it on between my doubles and hung what they called an aquamatic single hose regulator to it. My tanks came from Walter Kitty. I went to the Walter Kitty factory of the fire extinguisher tanks, and you could buy a nice tank for $10.
Everybody had a lift bag. You either made it themselves or you bought something that was not really good quality. And quite often seemed to blow out and you lose whatever you're bringing up.
I had to go to New York City to get air at that Richards Army Navy store.
They weren't all over the place. One would come, one would go, but it was mostly New Brunswick. I think it was called Middletown. It was a grocery store down in their cellar. They would pump air down there. After a number of years, you got Divers Cove, you had the Edison's shop up there, skin diving center.
In the late 60s, there were essentially no dive shops. It was a project to get an airfill. There would be one or two places. I think there was one down in Asbury Park we would go to. But the first reliable place I found was Divers Cove in Lawrence Harbor, 1969.
Harvey Leonard had a little backyard operation going with a compressor, and Archie Ornstein had Central Skin Divers, and in Brooklyn and in one in Jamaica, and the other place to get air was Bob Chareau's dive shop in Bayshore. But you had a problem getting air from Bob Chareau because he had the typical ideal dive shop. Whenever you went there, there'd be a sign in the window that said, "Gone diving, come back later."
If it was this challenging to build a basic scuba rig, how'd they get offshore to the wrecks?
He was a sailboat, and he was probably the very first dive boat off of New Jersey.
And we just stood around till someone would take us out, some private boat or some fishing boat. The Albatross out of Barnegat Inlet. And these are the type of boats we had to have to go diving.
By 65, there was only about 4 or 5 dive boats. Al Bohm had like a little 18-footer. Carl Helwick went out and bought a Navy launch. Jay Porter would run these wreck trips, and then he would take a couple of divers on a boat. George Hoffman was doing his thing. John Lawson was doing his thing. Paul Hepler. A whole bunch of guys down out of Jersey.
Shipwreck diving didn't come until a few years after I started diving because of the number of boats that were available. One thing led to another, and I had to get my own boat.
We would go diving from the spring all the way through the summer into the fall. The first year, I probably would go diving 5 days a week. Not in the daytime, at night. We'd finish up work, and my brother and I would go right down to the beach, and we'd go diving. We were in the water. We were wet all the time.
Getting to a shipwreck today is easy. It only takes a call to a dive shop and a sea card to reserve a spot on a dive boat. But in the early days, it was quite a different story.
To begin with, we found the wrecks just visually using radio antennas or houses.
It was a little difficult.
They would run the 5-fathom curve, the 10-fathom curve, the 20-fathom curve. As uniquely as it was, these guys ran time and distance.
Depth recorders, well, they were just coming into their own. And if you had the money, you could buy one. If you didn't have the money, you would throw a grappling hook out like we used to do.
So how do you find a wreck when you don't have a depth recorder? You learn the technique of dragging the anchor behind the boat.
And drag the spot until you hook something. Ranges were the first thing that people would use back in the old days.
I have books of pictures where you just sit there and you draw pictures of the horizon. And you put your high points and your moving points and you put all that stuff in it. And what a lot of people don't understand about land ranges is they only materialize at a certain point offshore. In other words, when you're too close in, you don't get that look. When you're too far out, you don't get that look. It just doesn't fit together. And somebody else looking at your picture will say, "You're not here."
We use sextants, and you take a water tank or 2 water tanks, and you get a certain angle between them. Ordinarily, sextants are used in a vertical position to shoot the sun and get a position. But if you go horizontally, you can use tanks, water tanks along the shore. That's one of the characteristics of the Jersey Shore is all the water tanks. And then you take the second sextant and wait till the angle comes right on the second and the third tanks. And then you're right on the wreck.
A Loran system out, which was called Loran A, which was basically an oscilloscope. And you had to know where you were to know where you were. It may sound confusing, but you read blips on a screen, and it would be the 7th blip. I never got to understand the whole system.
People that knew everything were the party boat people. So you would kind of watch what they were doing and where they were going and what they were on. And you take a range and come back and see what it was all about.
What we had to do is we had to follow the fishing boats out and locate where the inshore wrecks were.
So we did this until maybe the mid-70s when Loran-C came up.
And we managed to find something every time we went out to dive on. We didn't know much at all, very, very few that were actually available compared to what's out there now. We made up a system to drag the bottom like the draggers would use, a set of doors with rope running down to each door. You would just run along at an idle or nice slow pace. And when you stopped moving, you go down and see what you hung up on. And we found a lot of wrecks doing that. Chauncey Jerome Jr., Palestine. These are places that we went to as a regular stop.
Stoll was interesting, although it was just a half. We got there 4 days after it went down and followed us. We didn't know where we were going except the general direction. We ran into an oil slick and decided to follow it. And that was the clue. And finally the fathometer came up and she was down there.
Northeast Sailor, nobody had ever been on that one before. I don't think anybody was ever on the Spring Lake Sailor before we got to it. And they were all over the place.
I mean, these modern instruments, the GPSs and this and that, are ruining the wreck dive. Not enough is sinking right now.
Most of the shipwrecks we dive are falling apart and are fading into a rusty shadow on the ocean floor. Today's high-tech electronics, improved weather predictions, and modern shipbuilding have improved maritime safety, nearly eliminating disasters at sea and the creation of new shipwrecks.
1961, I made my first wreck dive. Roy and June Keyser were members of the Long Island Dolphins, which I became a member of the Long Island Dolphins, which is the oldest incorporated dive club in New York State, which was incorporated in 1952. And it was basically spearfishing people, breath-holding spearfishing people. You had to be invited. You didn't go anyplace. Nobody, you couldn't turn around and say, I want to pay or I want to do this. One Friday evening, my phone rings and said, we're going scuba diving tomorrow in San Diego. You want to come? I said, I sure want to go. He said, I'd be in Freeport, Woodcliff Canal, on the Jess Lou at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was on the boat at 2 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't go to sleep that night at all. This is going to be my first trip out into the ocean, my first absolute wreck dive. And to go on the USS San Diego, which a deep dive, it was 100 feet to the bottom. And when you talked about going to 100 feet, back in 1960, 61, you're talking about deep diving. I was so excited I couldn't remember anything. All I know is that when I jumped in the water, and they tell you just swim down until you find a wreck. You just swam as fast as you could down to the bottom. And when you got to the bottom, you looked around, and you'd be like a little dizzy at first. I was swimming down this dark wall, not realizing that I was swimming alongside the hull of the wreck going down. And my dive partner was Roy Keyser. He always had a sinus problem, so he was holding his head, but he was floating maybe about 4 or 5 feet above the bottom, and he was feathering his fins gently. And I looked, and underneath him was like this 4-foot goosefish. I had never seen one before. This is, I'd seen him, understood him from, Dangerous Marine Animals in the book. When a goosefish is awake, its antenna is always moving. If his antenna is not moving, the goosefish is not awake. But he's feathering his fins, and all of a sudden I'm seeing this sand and a silt move off this thing, and I seen this gigantic outline. So I just went over and I grabbed him, and I'm pointing down, because I was like, I was wired, like this is your first wreck dive. Everything was like so brand new, and I was so excited that I didn't even know I was breathing. We swam around, we swam over to the hull, and the wreck was very, very much intact at that time. And I was just, all I could do is my eyes must have been about the biggest saucers just looking at the propellers. That was my first dive.
Here's a partial list of the wrecks that I've dove off New Jersey and Long Island. RP Resort, Hobart, Tugboat, Great Isaac, Rustlin, and Adonis. There was a 160 Arundo. It was made of wood. And so, USS Bass. Now, USS Bass, Forsberg put us on that because he didn't know what it was. And I identified it, and we got down there and found it was a submarine. Bill Hudeman had spun the hatch, and we saw what looked like diver's regulator free-flowing. And so we just went towards it, and we got closer to it, and it was a column of air coming out of the submarine's hatch. And it came up, and it just went all over the ocean, and it terrified the captain because it pushed his boat away, and he didn't know what the hell was happening. The submarine was half full of air. And then on another dive, I went in and I found a box that said USS Bass on it. So we finally found out what that was. Varinger, that's a nice wreck. I got the nameplate off that, and so that was identified.
The Cadet was a common wreck, but next to it was the Brunette wreck, and nobody knew it. Charlie Stratton found that one time, and he put the hook in, and I was the first to go down and see it. And we stumbled onto doorknobs and became the doorknob wreck.
The Pinta is an interesting example. We dove the Pinta once, and we headed down, and the water was like a cup of coffee. You could hardly see the end of your arm until we got about 40 feet down, and oh my mackerel, you could see the whole wreck. Just unbelievable condition. The dirt on top and clear on the bottom. I've never seen anything like that since. The Oregon is a very classic wreck. It has a huge engine and the big prop sticking out from the sand. And there's the helm, but it got away from us. I took a picture of it, and then we sent it up in a lift bag, but they sometimes fail. That would have been a nice goodie. I found her on the Stoltagolly. I was mucking around the stern, saw a porthole in the door. The door wouldn't open, and I stuck my hand through the porthole and grabbed something, which I knew was the end of somebody's leg, and it was Hilma Marie Holman. I wanted to dive the Doria because I knew it was there, and I talked to Paul Forsberg. Forsberg was willing to take us because we had the numbers, and he wanted to fish it, and we planned a June 1966 trip. A group of a dozen divers who were deep divers. So this was the first time that what I call sport divers, I don't know what to call, amateur, sport, whatever, we had hooked something into what was probably wreckage. And it was virtually a night dive. Down we went. And it was dark, and it was gloomy, and the visibility was all right, but it was, you know, it was sort of New Jersey, 30 feet or so on the way down. You could see something looming on the bottom, and there was the side of the ship. You could say the dive on the Andrea Doria is sort of a pinnacle.
It really started when I built the Wahoo. So when I finished my boat in 1980, at the end of 1980, and we found out that 1981 was going to be the 25th anniversary, I had planned a trip to go to the Doria. And this fellow, Bill Campbell, contacted me as a photographer. And we get talking on the telephone and says he wants to go to the Doria because it's the 25th anniversary. He had commenced the making of this particular plaque, this bronze plaque to commemorate the sinking of the 25th anniversary. The first trip we ran there out of Captree. It's 147 miles straight to the Doria. We ran in 10-foot seas, and the seas never laid down for 2.5 days. And we're riding high in the sea. I mean, the water is running all over the place. I wound up being honored carrying this plaque in the water because the fellow that was supposed to carry it, Rick Freiberg, got seasick on the boat. Bill Campbell came to me and says, I need somebody to take the plaque down so I could take a picture of a diver with the plaque. And he said, would you do it? And I says, sure. As I didn't calculate that this thing weighs about 8 pounds. On one wave, I just slipped off into the water. And the next thing you know is at about 45 or 50 feet. The extra weight of this I hadn't calculated for it was like I was heading straight for the bottom. And then I swam over to the anchor line, and this became a world famous photo of me with this on the wreck. And that was the start of how I made the Andrew Dury household name, that we were going to send up a set of windows, not just one of these bronze windows. We were going to send up a set of 6 of them. We put 200, 500-pound bags on it. We filled the bags up to full, so they were straining on the line, cut the line, and when the windows left the wreck, they were going like they were shot out of a bow and arrow. And the roar that came out of the lift bags was, you know, the air expanding, you know, like it was like enormous. It sounded like a locomotive running.
Diving was new and exciting back then, filled with mystery and adventure. The shipwrecks were also home to abundant marine life like giant lobsters.
Lobstering is my love. That's what I love to do.
I enjoyed lobstering. That was one of the first things. Artifacts came second. You could catch a big lobster back in the old days. A 15-pound lobster was something you could see quite often.
The average lobster we get would be between 5 and 11 pounds, 12 pounds, like that. We'd go out, 4 guys, and we'd probably get 300 pounds of lobster.
3 or 4 divers, the whole back of the boat, just lobsters from one end to the other.
This was caught on the logwood back in about 1976, I think. In fact, I even have a picture of this. I caught it, I took a picture of it just as the camera was flooding, so it's not a very good picture. 20 pounds, I guess this claw is about 14 to 15 inches long. Of course, when you grab a lobster, the first thing you do when you go in is you have to stabilize this claw. It has a crusher claw and it has a pincer claw. So the idea is to stabilize the crusher claw, which I did, and just drag him out. And he was so big because I had to swim up with him. We'd get 10 to 15-pound lobsters almost every week. And I guess a lobster like this is probably 75, 100 years old, 150 years old from what I've heard.
Scuba has come a long way since these divers first ventured into the depths. We thank these legends and all the pioneers for their contributions to the sport and for sharing many exciting, colorful stories. The thrill of diving shipwrecks, it brings out the explorers in all of us. Diving the shipwrecks in the Northeast, it has to be experienced.
There used to be a saying that if you can dive a New Jersey wreck, you can dive anywhere. Once I did get bitten. I just pulled out a lobster and was putting it in the bag when I sat down on someone else's bag, and the lobster in his bag bit me in the can.
Here in the Northeast, thousands of shipwrecks lie just offshore.
All right.
That's amazing.
So,
So anybody have questions or?
well, the lobsters, so it would be illegal to take a lobster that big. My biggest is 8¼ pounds. You probably couldn't get a lobster over 5 pounds these days. It would be illegal to take them. And of course, you can't take females bearing eggs. And if the tail has a V-notch in it, you can't take those.
Wow. Do you still go lobstering though?
It's not.
We get a couple here and there, but the answer is yes.
The answer is yes, but our best day of lobstering, Maureen, was it was her season after becoming an finishing her advanced open water class. We went back to the wreck of the USS Algol, which was an artificial reef, and the two of us together, working together, caught 11 lobsters in 2 dives. But we've never done that again.
Yeah. But we do, when we go out, we lobster, I like to spearfish, and we get mussels, fresh mussels. We used to be able to get scallops, but we haven't seen scallops lately, so.
Haven't
Yeah.
seen a monkfish in a while.
Yeah.
What was that fish that the one guy was describing at the bottom?
The monkfish.
Yeah,
That's the
or he
monkfish.
said goosefish, but
goosefish.
So,
it's
yeah,
a
he called
monkfish.
it something else. Have you seen one of those before?
We've shot them, but
Yeah.
we haven't seen them in 10 years.
Oh,
It's actually an anglerfish.
an
That's
egg,
another
because
thing,
it's
yeah.
got a
Yeah.
little, it's got a lure on it, right?
If you
Yep.
go into a restaurant and you get monkfish, what you're eating is the tail. Because they eat
Right.
lobsters and they skin the tail with the white meat, it tastes like lobsters.
Wow.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that fish is like all head. I've cleaned those fish before.
And they got like a
Slimy.
grain, there's like a grain membrane on them, and you gotta get that membrane off. But Emma Lagasse's got a really good recipe for it.
So does anybody have any questions, I guess, before we go into the
women?
video on the women or
The ladies.
the ladies?
Yeah. I'm surprised. I'll say, so I got into scuba diving in, you guys are going to laugh, 1999, right? And we got certified for the 2000 New Year. But when in my early diving career, I mean, it was all about the Doria and the Doria diving and all of that. So I just love hearing all of these stories, like Sally's stories, and I'm like, I read about you in the books. I mean, it's just pretty cool stuff. And then of course I've no friends like Bill Harrison has dove the Doria. Bjorn, I think, has dove the Doria. So we've had some friends dive it since, but it's kind of fallen in on itself now.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
there's
what
not
about
as
the
many
San
dive
Diego?
boats. There's not as many dive boats as there used to be, and
Yeah.
so.
So
But
it's just fun listening to the stories, and just being a diver, I don't necessarily have to be a deep wreck diver per se, but just to
Right.
get excited about the stories, but just enough to go, no, don't do it,
Right. Yeah, I mean we do we call it the pretty fish and the pretty reefs diving, and
Yeah.
it's fun, but we cannot wait to get back and dive on the shipwrecks. It's just so cool.
Very fun.
And every shipwreck, I mean that's that's one of the things we focus on with the history of each shipwreck, because it has like a life of its own. Like when you understand
Absolutely.
what everything about the ship, and of course the history of the original divers on these shipwrecks and the artifacts that they bring back. Sally's gonna share some of that in our next video.
I love it.
Yeah.
Paul, do you have any questions on Messenger or anything?
I don't see any in the chat, but Andrea has a question.
Hey, this is great. I don't dive, so I don't know what a lot of the things you're talking about. The guy invented a pony bottle. What did the guy?
Mike DeCamp took a lot of credit for a lot of things. And it's what these guys say, when we do these videos, we live with these guys for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like we have Sally-isms and we have Evelyn Dudis-isms and Steve Belinda-isms, because this is what they say. So the pony bottle, he said he invented it. Evelyn Dudis kind of debunked it. I don't know if it's in the video. She said Mike, always took a lot of credit, but he always had a camera with him. But she talks about the bottle, and Mike was always afraid of running out of air. So that's why he was the only guy at that time running around with a pony bottle between his two main bottles.
So Andrea, what it is it's just a smaller little tank with
Oh.
additional air in it, right? So that you can switch to it if you run out of air, especially back in those days when they were talking about that, they'd pull the, they'd start to breathe that it was like breathing out of a milkshake straw, and so they'd pull the reserve, and then sometimes the reserve wasn't there because of whatever reason. So this guy had a small pony bottle to give him a little bit of extra air, enough to get to the surface. Yeah.
But
that's all it was.
today, actually, I dive with a Steel 100 and a 30 cubic foot pony bottle, because when we dive in the Northeast, we have redundancy everything: redundant air, redundant regulators, redundant computers, redundant, because the visibility. I mean, 30 feet is a really good day of visibility. It's more like 10 to 20, so it's easy to get separated, and you need to be able to be self-sufficient. So that's
Well, and the reality is that, like, if you do this long enough, you rack up a bunch of all the things that can go wrong stories.
Yeah. Well, you just have to have the training, so when things go wrong, what you have tools in the toolbox.
Tools in the toolbox.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Redundancy.
exactly.
Right. Yeah. So excellent.
We've said that to future instructors. They said, why don't you stay and be a dive master for a couple of years? You have to have a couple of good stories before you can become a good instructor. And we've met people. We're going to Maureen had like 450 dives, 500 dives when we were going for instructor. I had about 1,500 because I was diving a lot longer. And the girl is telling Maureen, today's my 99th dive and tomorrow's my 100th. And on Sunday, I'm going to be a diving instructor.
You're like, you're just shaking your head going, oh boy. I'm afraid I think I was one of those, by the way. I have a lot more racked up now, but yes, you know, as an industry, you know, you can do 0 to hero, unfortunately, you know.
Right. But it's good to get, if I could go back, I'd still be a dive master. I tell all the other instructors and dive masters that I'm a dive master with an instructor rating.
That's Sally. She's pointing to herself there. And then
Yeah.
I know my friend Bill Harrison, I think the only reason why he became an instructor is because I asked him to. But he was very happy being a dive master for his wife. So speaking,
Alright.
so let's that's a great segue. So let's share some stories about the ladies.
All right. We're gonna roll it. At the dawn of Northeast wreck diving, there were legendary men who dared the depths and established a local dive culture. Right alongside them, also shaping the sport, were women. Join the Dive Voyager team as we meet these women of Northeast wreck diving and relive their incredible stories. Not only did they deal with rudimentary equipment, they fought for acceptance in a sport dominated by men. But they conquered these challenges and now have great tales of adventure to share. The Dive Voyager team wanted to know why these women were drawn to the emerging sport. So we talked to Evelyn Dudas, the first woman to dive the Andrea Doria, the Mount Everest of wreck diving, Deb Whitcraft, Northeast shipwreck historian and museum curator, Sally Warman, early crew member of the research vessel Wahoo, and June Keyser, the first nationally certified female YMCA scuba instructor. The intrigue of the underwater world was certainly a reason these women decided to dive, but the lure of handsome men also played a role.
Basically, I was introduced to diving by a guy.
When I was a junior in high school, I started dating a guy who was a diver.
My husband, Roy, he talked me into trying his face mask, and I tried the face mask and went out in the water, and wow, what I saw was really a revelation, and that was it.
I met a beautiful man who had a beautiful girlfriend. They were both from Buffalo, and she was homecoming queen, things like that. And I said, man, I don't qualify on that count. So this guy has a boat, and I think that we could take up scuba diving together.
Impressing the guys wasn't easy because dive gear wasn't made for a woman's body. More importantly, gear that didn't fit right was a big hindrance to comfortable and safe diving.
At one time, you could only get black wetsuits, and they were male wetsuits.
We made our own. A lot of us made our own.
I started manufacturing suits because I could buy them for like $35, and I sold them for $70 at club meetings.
All the BCs were horse collars, and with a horse collar BC and a woman's stature, as soon as you put air in it, it went right up in your face. So it was kind of difficult to dive. Plus, they didn't make gloves small enough. They didn't make boots small enough, things of that nature.
Women also struggled for acceptance, having to prove themselves worthy to scuba clubs, charters, and to the overall dive community.
They wouldn't let girls in back then, only men. But they let us come to the meetings, they let us take the minutes, they let us prepare the food, but they wouldn't let us be members until we revolted and said, no membership, no food, no minutes, no nothing.
This one day, this guy comes up from Georgia, and he came specifically to dive to San Diego. And what happened was he needed a buddy. So Steve said, don't worry, I'll put you with somebody good. So he gets on the boat, and Steve tells him he's diving with me. Well, this guy says, I don't want to dive with her. You know, he was like, I want to dive with somebody good. And Steve says, you're diving with her. Of course, Steve pulled me aside and said, this guy has an attitude, Sally, so take him for a ride, basically. So I was diving at the time with the single 71.2 cubic inch tank, an old steel tank, and I had a pony bottle. This guy had doubles. So we go down into San Diego, and I take him out the gun turret and around and through the engine room and up the other side and around and back. And just as I'm turning to take him somewhere else, he taps me on the shoulder and he's low on air. He's so low on air that when we went up and we did the safety stop, I had to give him my regulator, and I went on my pony bottle, and I had at least a half a tank of air left. And then we came up from the dive, and he said to Steve, boy, she's some kind of diver. But it was that kind of attitude that a lot of times some of the guys didn't accept women as well, and they just felt that maybe they were inferior in diving, although the people that I dove with never felt that way.
Though it was challenging, they persevered, each creating their own niche within the dive culture along the way. In 1952, June Keyser started teaching scuba at the YMCA, and 7 years later became the organization's first nationally certified female instructor. June taught well-known divers like Captain Steve Belinda and Captain Bill Redden, as well as police, firemen, and U.S. Merchant Marine Academy cadets.
There was no national certification of any kind, but we started teaching in the Y in 1954, and I sat down with ER courses, underwater safety, and came up with a course outline. The Conference for National Cooperation in Aquatics that met up at Yale every year had a committee that was mostly fellows from the YMCA, headed up by Bernie Empleton in Washington, D.C., and they were establishing and writing the book, The Science of Skin and Scuba Diving. And out of that came your first national certification through the YMCA in 1959. And that's when we were officially certified as instructors. Before that, there wasn't any. And supposedly, according to Bernie, I was the first woman nationally certified as a YMCA instructor. Current divers that I knew and taught and certified, one would be Steve Belinda. And I remember my first night in class, I stood up in front and I looked at this row of, in my mind then, Brooklyn toughs sitting in the front row. And I said to myself, oh my God. And this one in the middle, who turned out to be Steve, looked up and he said, oh, a lady teach. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, a lady teach. And when you know what I know, you can stand up here. Eventually he did.
June's teaching career brought her great satisfaction, as well as great opportunity.
There was a female diver in the group. They had just recently allowed females into the academy, and she was one of them. And anyhow, at the end of the dive, she came up to the surface and let out a yahoo! And that really did it. That did it. When the Calypso was in for its oceanographic year in 1959, got to work as one of the tour guides showing the public the boat, and had the real pleasure of, after our job was done, is sitting in the galley with the crew and Cousteau and his wife Simone, and having a lot of laughs and talking. And in fact, my husband and a couple of the other divers took the crew of the Calypso out diving on the T-Wreck. Can you imagine the Calypso crew on the T-Wreck after what they dived? But they did. And I mean, there were so many other things that I got to do that I wouldn't have got to do done if I hadn't got involved into diving.
June's scuba instruction was put into practice by her student, Captain Steve Belinda, on his boat, the RV Wahoo, where Sally Warman was a crew member.
When I met Steve, he was always open to women in diving. And I always thought that it might be because of the fact that he was taught to dive by a woman. Janet was his captain, I was his crew member, and he was taught to dive by June Keyser.
Sally has hundreds of dives on wrecks in the Northeast, including the Andrea Doria. Set one foot in her living room, and cabinets of china, bottles, deadeyes, and silverware reveal her greatest passion in diving, salvaging artifacts.
I started diving the Andrea Doria in 1982. I dove it from 82 through to 97, and I have over 60 dives. I have 60 log dives on her. I only ever dove it on air. People always ask me, did I get narked? And of course you get narked, but usually just the first dive, when you dive it repetitively, then you really get accustomed to it. When I dove the Doria the first time, I didn't get any artifacts, and I wanted to bring something back from the Doria. So now don't laugh, okay? You see that bottle up there with water? That's the water from my BC from my first dive on the Doria. Captain Janet Beezer on the Wahoo dove with me, and we were probably the first woman dive team to ever dive the Doria together. And because of people talking about getting lost and disoriented in the corridor, Janet wanted to take my cave diving reel down and attach the line outside. So we attached the line outside the wreck where we dropped down in the hole. It was about 175 feet, and you drop down to 205 to the corridor. And what happened was, at that point, person would go up the corridor, look for the dishes, the other stay at the opening with the light. So I was to stay at the opening with the light, and Janet went up the corridor, and she decided at that point she didn't need the reel. So I'm holding the reel, but there's a light on top of the reel. And what happened was I ended up dropping the reel. It went down, and the light was just swinging back and forth, but I had the line in my hand. So I thought, oh my goodness, that when Janet comes out, she's going to see the light, because there were areas that you could drop down in, and she would come down to the light, which was down at like 250 feet or something. I like kind of panicked, and I was probably a little narked. So I started pulling the line up, but I pulled it up really fast, and I ended up pulling it all over me, and I was tied up in a web. When Janet came out, she took one look at me and kind of laughed. We both laughed. And then she said, 1 minute. And she went upside the wreck and took our dishes out and put them in a safe spot. And then she came back and cut me out of it. Later, people criticized Janet for that, because she said, oh, you should have saved it. But we were cool. I mean, everything was fine. She knew I was comfortable, and I knew she was coming back. So it was fine. And we got a lot of dishes, thanks to Jan. So it was neat. This is a dish from the Oregon. My buddy Mary and I went diving. I went in the hole. I had to squeeze, and Mary pushed my tanks down to get in. I got the dish. I handed it out to Mary. And of course, the dish was more important than me at the time. So she had to secure the dish first, put it in the bug bag, and then she pushed on my tanks to get me out. And then when I came up, Steve said, are there a bunch of other dishes there? I said, oh yeah, there's a lot of dishes down there. And of course they went down, there weren't any other dishes. This is actually a rare dish, because in the early 60s, when they dove the wreck, people like Evie Dudas and people of that nature, they were just scattered all over the wreck. But by the time I dove it in the late 70s and early 80s, these were hard to come by. So it's kind of special to me, and I kind of like the story that I kind of tricked Steve. This is a pendant that actually Steve Belinda made for my friend Mary, and he gave it to her. He was in some kind of trouble with us, I guess. So he gave it to her as appeasement. It's actually a piece of a plate that was broken on the SS Oregon.
Sally's most beloved artifacts are on display in her home, but she's more than willing to share them with those who have a special connection to the wrecks.
One of the ladies at my hairdresser's place, I found out the other day, came over on the Doria. She was a child. She came over on the Doria, and when I found that out, she has the Doria dish.
Sally wasn't the only woman aboard the Wahoo. Janet Beezer was a captain, and sometimes Evelyn Dudas would come aboard.
It was kind of neat, because she was the, I guess, the first woman to ever dive the Doria, and so it was neat when she came out and dove it again with us later in the 80s.
Evelyn is a legend in Northeast wreck diving. She started in 1961 and is still actively influencing the sport through her shop Dudas' Diving Duds. But her fame comes from being the first woman to dive the Andrea Doria. Evelyn told the Dive Voyager team about her first encounter with the sunken Italian ocean liner.
We had celebrated the night before, arriving at the dock, unloading things. I had a little pair of leather boots and a short mini skirt and some black stockings and a nice little leather top. And we went into Salivar's, I think was the name of the bar, and I was drinking martinis. It's a 10-hour ride out there. We hired a cook, and the cost of this trip was $30, 3 days out there, $10 a day, and then $28 for my share of the food for the 3 days for this man to cook it. Nobody wanted to be the first one down because you didn't know where it went. It could have gone to 240. We're diving air on like weeny little tanks, no decompression cylinders, no pressure gauge for me. I was too poor to have a pressure gauge. I disappeared down into the promenade deck because there was no current. And then you could pull along. I grabbed what I thought was a spittoon or a bucket of some sort and wrestled it off its stand. And it's like, that bottom timer says we've been down here 15 minutes and we're at 170 feet. We came up out of the wreck, and of course the current was taking us. I ended up all the way back at the propeller. I totally missed the wing. I was knocked out of my skull. Oh, there it is up there. Okay. And then I came up, my heart's pounding 1,000,000 miles an hour, and did probably a 10-minute decompression, something totally inadequate. And we had zoomed right up to 10 feet.
Evelyn's had thousands of dives, not all on the Doria. She dove the Oregon, the San Diego, the USS Bass, and the oil wreck, to name a few. She has over 200 dives on the Stolt alone. Many artifacts are displayed throughout her home and dive shop, including one-of-a-kind treasures, like a ship's compass, its binnacle, and the bell, each speaking to her love of the adventure of diving in the Northeast. This earned her the respect of great divers of the time, such as Mike DeCamp and George Hoffman. She has many stories to tell, like this one on the Oregon.
Mike DeCamp claims he found the helm. Mike DeCamp had the helm delivered to him from above because Evelyn Bartram found the helm. I happened to work the bow on the port side, and the helm was still attached to its little stand, and it had a little piece of wood like you would stand on, probably 4 feet wide and 5 feet long. And I'm like, oh, I found the helm. Look. And then I went over to it. Now, it didn't have all its wheel on it. It had some spokes and just a round thing in the center. I go, well, that's pretty garbagey looking. It's not the whole thing. And I pulled it off. And I go, it comes off. And I stuffed it right back on again. And then I had to go find John. It's like, come here, I found the helm, and drag him over. Then he took the helm, and by this time we had too much time down. He put the helm between his legs, and we're undoing one of these upline reels, and he became spazzo, and it dropped from between his legs. And when it went right down in front of Mike DeCamp, and I believe that was Don Nitch with Mike. Mike always had a camera, much to his credit, because of documenting things, and he was able to take a picture of it. And then Don took one of those Hypro bags out and put a lift bag on it, but he didn't put a line on it, and he sent the Hypro bag up, and the bag proceeded to float away, never to be seen again, and nobody's got the helm.
That's a big disappointment, especially to someone with as much of a competitive spirit as Evelyn.
That's a pretty nifty thing in the eyes of your peers to be able to bring something worthwhile back. It was kind of like, how worthy a diver are you by, how good an artifact you could bring up.
Like Evelyn, Deb Whitcraft loved recovering artifacts, but more important to her was the story that each shipwreck told. Opening a dive shop, running her own boat, and teaching students was a means of preserving and sharing the rich maritime history that few were aware of, though it lay just offshore.
I was more interested, not so much in the sport, but the historical aspects of diving, because we have, my research alone has over 7,200 shipwreck sites off the Jersey coast, and that's only the number of documented wreck sites. There are far more than that were never documented. To see parts of what used to be an intact ship or sailing vessel or whatever it happened to be lying strewn along the bottom in pieces, some identifiable, some not. Really, it's fascinating because it gives you a glimpse into your past that you don't learn about in school.
As a scuba instructor, Deb made sure female divers had the confidence and skills to be a safe and successful diver.
When I taught diving and ran dive trips, I made it a point to always try to buddy up my female divers with other women. And there was a reason for that, because men instinctively feel protective toward a woman. And I wanted my female divers and my students who, you know, went on to become accomplished divers, I wanted them to be dependent on nobody but themselves. Some of the best divers I've ever seen have been women. Evelyn Dudas is a primary example.
To further share her love of maritime history and to preserve the stories that the shipwrecks tell, she realized her dream and opened the Museum of New Jersey Maritime History in 2007.
My passion is to display to the public, especially the non-diving public, what exists off our coast and is recovered from these shipwreck sites. There's just so much out there that unless it's viewed by people who, you know, want to see a different part of history that they'll never ever have a chance to view otherwise, it will be lost forever, because these wrecks, no matter how shallow or how deep a water they're in, they don't stay intact forever, and eventually they're lost. I think once they realize what's out there, and if they have any interest in maritime history and shipping and sailors and the life of these people 100, 200 years ago, I think one dive and they would be hooked. I really do.
Like Deb, each of these women share a love for diving in the Northeast.
The visibility isn't as bad as people think, and it's certainly a lot more intriguing, I think, than just diving pretty fish and pretty reefs.
You know, the wheelhouse equipment, auxiliary steering equipment in the back. You know, the artifacts are still there. Somebody's, you know, recovering them and bringing them back.
June Keyser, Sally Warman, Evelyn Dudas, and Deb Whitcraft are credited with molding the sport of Northeast wreck diving. But it wasn't just in their hands. Other influential women have contributed over the years, each taking home their own treasured memories.
I look back at all my artifacts in my house, and I'm like, I can relive every dive. It's just neat.
Yay, so much fun.
It's been a while since we watched that, right, Sally?
You're muted, Sally.
I know, I just unmuted me.
It's
been a while since I watched that. I didn't realize how much footage I had in there.
Yes.
That
A lot
last
of the
picture with the big wheel, that's the steering quadrant on the Oregon. The Oregon was a luxury liner of its time. It carried 697 passengers. It was rammed in the night by a schooner, and all the passengers were rescued. It was of the Cunard line. It was originally, that plate that I was holding was made, the ship was built by Guion Shipworks, and Guion was going bankrupt, so Cunard bought them out. Okay.
Wow.
First time I went to Evie Dudis's house, we ate dinner on Cunard plates from the Oregon.
Well, and I do want to, when I was listening to all of that, you know, Y-kiki Divers, back in the day when it was started, in 1989, used to run all the YMCA scubas, programs here in St. Louis. So I kept the name, and it was always a nod to all of those instructors that, kind of like they were describing in the videos about, you know, the females divers and how they were contributing to curriculum, right? That was a huge part of Y-kiki Divers back in the day, was taking part in the national YMCA level of scuba diving and creating curriculum and that sort of thing. So you know, cheers to our predecessors, for sure. The male and the female predecessors in our sport. So
yes,
pretty cool, you know.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I love hearing the history of it all. All it makes me want to do is, you know, I got to go do the San Diego, Sally. Let's go. You know.
Sally, you're going to be in New Jersey in August, you said, or September?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be there in June, July. Not August, because maybe the end of August.
Okay.
because
Yeah,
I'm going to bikini, you know.
yeah.
Because I'm
But
going to Bikini Atoll. Oh, oh. Yeah, we tried to do that once, but then COVID got in our way, so we haven't been able to
Yeah.
circle back on that trip. So that's going to be an adventure. We want to hear about that one too.
well, the San Diego was for the Wahoo, for the Steve's boat. It was like our bread and butter wreck because it was a close wreck and it was well known. It was the only major naval casualty loss during World War One. It had hit a mine set by the U-boat, the 156, and turtled and sank in 15 minutes. And you hit the top of it about, well, it used to be higher, it's lower
Yeah.
now, about 65 feet, and it goes to 105. So it's well within
Perfect,
the
yeah.
limits. The problem with the San Diego is that people would penetrate the wreck and didn't know what they were doing. And
Sure.
it would
Forget the
buck
story.
up real easily. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, you know, you should take, if you want to do any type of penetration on shipwrecks, you should take a wreck diving course and understand what you're doing.
Absolutely. You know, it's easy to get lured in and then turn around and not know how to get back out.
I have to apologize for my pretty fish and pretty reefs because I do love them.
I know. I was
Yeah,
gonna
we
say,
do love
oh,
them too.
but
We like
we
both.
do
also
love it.
know.
But
Yeah,
what happened was when I first got certified, I was diving in New York and I thought, wow, this is really good. And I can't wait till I get to the Caribbean. So I went to Club Med because I didn't have friends who were divers at the time. I didn't get married till the next year. Okay.
Yeah.
And I went to Club Med and pretty fish and pretty reefs and pretty fish and pretty reefs. And then one day I woke up, I was like, I want to do a shipwreck. Where's the shipwreck?
Did they find one for you?
No.
No. What Club Med were you at?
Martinique.
Martinique. All right.
And I did in 1 year. I did 3 Club Meds.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Then I found the dive club.
Yeah. Very
So-
cool. Well, I want to go back to we did San Salvador, the Bahamas, and there's a Club Med there, and I wouldn't mind doing that one. The Club Med at San Salvador. So you know, right on the edge of that Atlantic side. So one of these days. So many dive destinations, so little time, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
That's right. So, any other questions, Paul? How about on the message board? You're good?
I didn't see any questions. Just Bill said it was a fantastic presentation. Thank you. And Stacy said thanks for sharing all the adventures and history. She was certified with YMCA too, so thought it was interesting to hear some of that history.
Absolutely. I just this last DEMA, I was at the Nogi Awards, and I was just thinking when I was watching that video on Evelyn Dudas, I'm like, oh my gosh, I sat there and I had a cocktail with Evelyn. Yay! So cool. Yeah. So wicked cool. So
YMCA had the best courses. I
Yes.
got certified. My basic course was YMCA, and I was certified to 130 feet right away. Then I took the advanced open water course, and at the time, I had 10 weeks of classes. We had
Wow.
5 outings, 10 dives.
Wow.
We did rescue diver. We did we did quote simulated decompression dive on the Oregon, which is in 130 feet of water. So we did a decompression dive. We did a current dive. We did search and recovery
yeah.
and navigation. And the navigation we did at night, so you couldn't cheat.
That's true. Actually, here in Missouri, you can't really cheat too.
Yeah.
You really the visibility is such that you pretty
Yes.
much have to nail it. So, well, that leads me into one shameless plug here, Sally. So back in the day when you learned to dive, they really ran you through your paces, and the card that you earned, you know, the equipment was such that you really did have to be a lot more self sufficient. And as the sport progressed, you know, the industry sort of chopped it up into more palatable sizes, right? So, as a shop owner, it's my responsibility, I think, as an industry a member of the industry, to encourage our divers nowadays to work towards the highest recreational level, which is master scuba diver. So it's like the black belt of scuba diving. Yeah. But
I got it.
honestly, it's basically what you did in your advanced open water class,
Right,
except that we
yeah.
got to do open water advanced, rescue. We got to do 5 PADI specialties and 50 log dives. And that's kind of what you did just in your basic coursework. But nobody will give me that kind of time right out of the gate, right? So,
Well,
so we have to encourage people to move on through the system and set that goal a little bit higher. There's a contest running both by PADI and Y-kiki. So check out our website. Sean Dooley just posted a great landing page for us that gives all the details about our contest. But we're trying to encourage people to keep going and earn sort of the level that you guys earned right out of the gate. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you had to because of the equipment, you know, no depth gauge. We didn't have no stinking depth gauge, you know, and
Game valve.
yeah, and those, oh my gosh, those K valves, come on. So it's a wonder we all made it. So and I love hearing your stories, and I just can't get enough of them. I'll be honest with you.
That video that Mo just showed about women in Northeast diving, that's how I met her. She came
Yeah.
from
Oh, that's awesome. See, and it sucks you right in. You're like, tell me another story, Sally.
All right, guys, you got to hear this story from Sally. How we
Oh.
got her. So we're finishing the women of the pioneers of Northeast wreck diving. And I grabbed Steve Belinda. I said, "Hey, Steve, me and Maureen want to do the women of Northeast wreck diving. Can you get us Captain Janet?" And Captain Janet's very shy and reserved, so we're not going to get Captain Janet. Hank Garvin, who bought the Wahoo, says, "You don't want Captain Janet, you want Sally." And we're like, "There's a song. Who the fuck is Sally?" Well, we didn't know who Sally was, and that's an actual song. You can find it, and that's how we met Sally. So, Sally, tell her how Maureen annoyed you until you gave us an interview.
Yeah, she was
well,
gonna throw me out of her house practically.
What happened was she kept calling. Some broad was calling me from New Jersey, and I said, "Who the heck is this?" And then one of my dog buddies in Long Island, in New York, called me up and said, "Please answer the phone. It's not, whatever. She's okay, and she's okay." Then when it came to the house, you saw that beginning part where she said, "What got you interested in diving?" It was a guy, right? And what was one of the things you had trouble with is getting suits to fit you and everything. Well, she starts asking me these questions. She's taking notes, did it very professionally, and said, "Okay, after I take notes, then we'll go in the living room where they had the cameras set up, and I'm going to ask you the same questions, and you just wait 5 seconds or so and then answer them." Okay, fine. That sounds good. She asked me the first question. She starts laughing at me. Oh, she asked me the next question. She starts laughing at me. Now I'm getting upset. Who is this broad laughing at me, So finally she asked me the third, I don't remember what the third question was. And she started laughing again. And I slammed my hand down on the table. I said, we're done. And she goes, "What did I say? What did I do?" I said, "Why are you laughing at me?" She says, "Because the other 3 women said the same thing."
Oh.
So I was the 4th one to be interviewed, So
Yeah.
it was, you don't think about what you've come through. Probably you don't either, Val.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't think about how it was when you started diving, things like that. So, and I never went for instructor. I stopped I have dive master and master diver. I was actually the dive master for the Wahoo.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. No, exactly right. And so
I wanted to go diving.
Yeah,
you
right.
want to go
It's
diving.
true.
Yeah.
And when she's when she's on the Voyager, she's the dive master. We make her check everybody's sea cards.
I know.
Sally
that
says you
story.
can't
She's
dive,
good.
you ain't diving.
Yeah. If she doesn't accept you, you're out.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, Maureen and Steve, I want to thank you both for joining us tonight and sharing your videos. I know that they're, you did them a while back, but it is so much fun for a lot of us to get to revisit them, get to hear about the guys and the gals that, were our pioneers and created the industry for what I inherited, right? So just feeling very lucky this St. Patrick's Day to be a diver, a dive owner, and to be able to meet folks like yourself and to share our love together. So
Right.
that's what it's all about, right?
this is the dive life. Diving changed my life. So I
Amen.
think
I
we can
feel the
attribute
same
to
way.
that. You could say the same thing, right?
I can.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So, what a pleasure. Sure has been fun sharing, swapping stories, and I look forward to creating more memories in the future. So,
All right,
thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
thank
guys.
you.
Bye bye,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night.
Thanks
Good
for
night,
joining.
Sally. Thank
See
you.
Sally.
Good night,
Yeah.
Bye, Sal.
See y'all.
Bye, Steve.
Bye bye.
Bye, Val.
Bye, Valerie.
Bye.
Oh. I'm ending
It's
the
really
call.
interesting to me while we were in Galapagos.